The heavy iron doors of Notre Dame's highest belfry splintered inward, breaking a seal that had remained untouched for centuries. It was the autumn of 1792, and the streets of Paris were slick with the blood of the September massacres. But the men ascending the spiraling stone steps cared nothing for the collapsing monarchy. Below, armed with confiscation orders from the new republic, these removal crews were sent for a strictly utilitarian purpose: strip the ancient bronze bells, melt them down, and forge cannons for a desperate war. What they found, waiting in the suffocating darkness of the acoustic chambers, defied every known law of 18th century engineering. Behind false walls and centuries of accumulated dust sat massive, geometrically flawless copper coils and harmonic resonance arrays pulsating with a strange, latent energy. This was no Catholic campanology. The panicked archival sketches, hurriedly suppressed and later destroyed by the state, documented the dismantling of an impossible acoustic energy grid, a remnant of a forgotten epoch that history was about to violently erase. When historians recount the French Revolution, their attention is deliberately anchored to the ground. They are trained to look at the cobblestone streets, the fall of the Bastille, the severed heads of the aristocracy, and the revolutionary fervor that consumed a continent. The authorized narrative demands that we focus on the political theater, yet the true story, largely absent from revolutionary records and still hidden in the margins of surviving archives, unfolded hundreds of feet in the air. It commenced with a straightforward, highly publicized mandate. Workers throughout France received explicit instructions to remove bells from churches, cathedrals, and civic towers across the nation. The public justification was purely mathematical. The Republic was surrounded by monarchist forces, and the military required bronze. Confiscate the metal, melt it down into currency and artillery, and defend the revolution. It was a perfect, unquestionable excuse to access the most restricted, ancient, and sealed structures in the European world under the guise of patriotic duty. But the instant the laborers laid their hands on the infrastructure inside Notre Dame, Saint-Sulpice, and dozens of Paris churches, the official narrative began to fracture. They discovered mechanisms that had remained completely concealed from the public eye, inside the tower chambers at altitudes that few maintenance records ever documented. The teams found acoustic systems and resonance apparatuses that matched no recognized bell-hanging method on Earth. The configuration of these spaces was deeply unsettling. Their complexity was staggering, and the engineering bore absolutely no resemblance to anything found in contemporary bell-founding manuals. It did not echo French campanology. It did not reflect Italian acoustic traditions. The systems they uncovered were an anomaly that defied the accepted chronology of human technological development. This, of course, never appeared in the official revolutionary proclamations. It failed to reach the broadsheets in newspapers documenting the Republic's daily triumphs. Yet, in that year's internal classified documentation, a specific phrase emerges repeatedly among the foremen and metalworkers: unanticipated mechanisms, excessive complexity, purpose unclear. The authorized historical account would eventually reduce all of this to traditional bell supports, abandoned clock mechanisms, or merely decorative architectural features. Nothing remarkable, nothing deserving of further academic attention. But the removal records from that exact period, the raw, unfiltered documents processed in shadowy government facilities while Paris celebrated its liberation, reveal a terrifyingly different reality. They reveal ordinary laborers positioned next to massive copper conduits, fabricated with an accuracy far superior to what any metalworker of the 1790s could possibly produce. These components were assembled seamlessly, perfectly integrated into the stone. Even through the grainy, hurried quality of revolutionary-era sketches, their sophistication is undeniable. The foremen sketched patterns of coiled metal and geometric chambers that bore no similarity to any documented European tradition. They were looking at something infinitely more ancient, more mathematical, and fiercely intentional. And the further they dismantled the towers, the more the system ceased resembling anything related to music or worship. It increasingly resembled high-level technology that had been utilized, meticulously maintained, and then purposefully concealed from humanity. Initially, the removal crews attempted to rationalize their discoveries. They tried to classify everything in the most straightforward manner possible to appease their superiors. They logged elaborate bell supports, forgotten tower machinery, and decorative metalwork from earlier medieval renovations. But as the documentation grew, and as additional identical systems were revealed in towers across every district of Paris, the contradictions expanded beyond the point of denial. Why were certain acoustic chambers engineered with precise dimensions that created perfect harmonic resonance at specific non-musical frequencies? Why were massive copper coils arranged in complex geometric patterns, positioned exactly as though they were designed for energy distribution rather than sound production? Why did heavy metallic conduits continue directly into the thick tower walls, extending well beyond the boundaries of any bell installation, vanishing down toward the foundation of the earth? And then came the matter that disturbed even the most hardened, conventional metalworkers of the era. Why were these systems so incomprehensibly enormous? The confiscation orders demanded accurate inventories of bronze by weight, yet the acoustic infrastructure hidden within the restricted sections of Notre Dame, Sainte-Chapelle, and dozens of other supposedly religious structures seemed constructed for something vastly different than calling the faithful to Sunday prayer. The removal crews privately acknowledged in their journals and letters that the scale and sophistication simply did not correspond with any architectural blueprint or bell-founding documentation in existence. While none of these 18th century laborers employed terminology like vanished technologies or pre-reset civilization, they were recognizing something equally shattering. Someone had constructed these systems a very long time ago. They were not building bells. They were not crafting musical instruments. They were engineering power generation. As the physical records of these impossible machines multiplied, so did the institutional silence. The official reports returning from the towers grew drastically briefer. Accounts became intentionally ambiguous. The sketches ceased displaying the broadest perspectives of the mechanisms, zooming in only on mundane hinges and bolts. And then abruptly, the tower chambers were partially sealed again in late 1792. The operation shifted from a systematic dismantling to a frantic erasure. The remaining infrastructure was crudely secured where necessary for structural stability, but the vast majority of the anomalous technology that had just been revealed was violently stripped of its components and melted into slag. Only fragmented pieces survive today. A handful of contradictory documentation, several classified technical drawings, and the subdued, terrified accounts of archivists who examined the original files before they conveniently vanished in later century fires. But even from what endures, a terrifying configuration becomes apparent. We are looking at systems entirely too sophisticated for any documented installation. We are seeing engineering too exact for the accepted historical chronology. We are witnessing construction techniques that appear inherited from a forgotten world, an infrastructure that originates from an entirely different technological epoch. Consider the sequence of discovery. When the crews first ascended past the initial publicly accessible chambers within Paris's towers, their assumptions were standard. They anticipated discovering normal wooden yokes, heavy iron clappers, possibly some abandoned, gear-driven clockwork, and the dispersed debris of previous generations. Nothing peculiar. But within mere weeks, that comfortable premise disintegrated. Because rather than a clear, logical arrangement of bells and supports, the crews encountered a succession of sealed acoustic chambers that did not function the way tower spaces of an ordinary cathedral are meant to function. The initial reality-breaking anomaly was the tuning. Each tower, Notre Dame, Saint-Sulpice, Saint-Eustache, and dozens more appeared to maintain the exact same fundamental resonance frequency. They housed the same harmonic intervals. They featured the identical geometric arrangement of copper and stone. Different churches, different builders, different centuries. According to the mainstream timeline, this should be impossible. Different architects working hundreds of years apart do not construct their private hidden belfries in flawless acoustic alignment with structures built generations before or after them. Yet, their private hidden belfries in flawless acoustic alignment with structures built generations before or after them. Yet, at precise angles to amplify frequencies that corresponded perfectly with chambers in another church kilometers away. Acoustic. Channels in the north were aligned with corresponding channels in completely different districts to the south. Bell. Chambers maintained the exact same dimensional ratios. The golden ratio of acoustic perfection, even when the outer facades were constructed in vastly different, clashing architectural styles. It was as though every tower that ever rose above the Parisian skyline was blindly replicating an original frequency pattern, a master grid blueprint that no longer appears in any surviving architectural documentation. As the laborers pushed higher into the spires, hacking through sealed wooden bulkheads, the chambers grew even more inexplicable. Above the anticipated bell platforms, they started finding metalwork that resembled nothing from the realm of campanology. They uncovered substantially more complex coils. They found considerably tighter geometric arrangements. These were configurations that appeared entirely too mathematically precise for anything in Europe's recorded history. Certain chambers looked almost excessive in their design. The stone walls were lined with copper sheeting, creating spaces with perfect acoustic reflection, executed with an accuracy that simply did not correspond to the primitive hammer and forge metalworking of any documented period. And then arrived the finding that confused and terrified the removal teams the most. They found crystalline deposits. Thick, unnatural mineral formations were coating the hidden metal surfaces. These were substances that had crystallized in highly specific fractal patterns. Patterns that modern material science knows only develop under sustained, relentless vibrational exposure at highly specific frequencies. Yet there exists absolutely no historical documentation of these towers producing anything beyond standard intermittent bell tones. There are no records indicating continuous, unbroken acoustic operation at the immense intensity necessary to create such thick crystalline formations. There is nothing in the accepted history of humanity that accounts for why substantial portions of the tower chambers appear as though they had been subjected to sustained, high-level harmonic resonance for centuries, potentially millennia. The removal sketches created in the flickering lantern light of 1792 demonstrate this unmistakably. In the margins, laborers are drawn positioned beside coiled mechanisms so intricate that the men themselves appear primitive by comparison. The copper work was fabricated so accurately that even contemporary electrical engineers, when shown the surviving archival drawings, examine them in utter disbelief. They are looking at geometric arrangements and acoustic chambers that mirror technological installations far more sophisticated than anything revolutionary France or the Roman Empire was ever attributed with. But the most damning detail was not what surfaced in the documentation. It was what deliberately failed to surface in the state archives. The authorized reports composed by the Republic in the years immediately following the confiscation scarcely reference these characteristics. Certain illustrations aggressively exclude the most complex chambers altogether, leaving blank spaces on the blueprints. Particular highly advanced systems are suddenly condensed with indefinite, dismissive terminology like decorative features or ornamental architectural embellishments, even though the raw sketches demonstrate they were massively functional and structural. This orchestrated quiet is impossible to overlook. If these tower systems genuinely belong to recognized bell-founding traditions, why weren't they paraded as triumphs of French engineering? Why weren't the exceptional acoustic mechanisms recorded thoroughly for future generations? Why were the technical drawings deliberately dispersed across fragmented revolutionary archives instead of being compiled into a single metallurgical assessment? Even the basic copper components presented a massive historical problem. The geometric patterns were too precise. The surfaces were too refined. The crystalline deposits were too consistent. These formations appeared less like natural corrosion and entirely like the byproduct of sustained energy transmission. A transmission of power that, based on the conventional chronology taught in every school today, did not exist when those towers were presumably constructed. What the removal crews revealed were systems that did not correspond to French heritage, did not correspond to Italian techniques, and did not even correspond to each other in traditional religious terms. Instead, they constituted a highly advanced, peculiar technological vocabulary, one that appeared to originate from multiple periods, yet somehow remained perfectly cohesive, harmonically aligned, and impossibly exact. The deepest surprise arrived with the shape of the chambers themselves. These weren't simple, open-air platforms meant to let sound ring out over a city. They were geometrically flawless containment rooms. They were shaped with precise harmonic proportions, wrapped in copper-lined surfaces that preserved their reflective quality impeccably across the centuries. The acoustic systems were arranged with a coherence that looked exactly like the remnants of a master frequency network. A grid that had been deactivated, its purpose forgotten by the very people who worshiped beneath it. Certain chambers were found completely sealed with mortar, packed with materials so dense that the laborers initially assumed they had reached solid load-bearing stone. But once they broke through the masonry, they breached interiors that appeared undisturbed since the moment they were closed in some unrecorded past. They found polished surfaces, geometric coil arrangements, and acoustic configurations that generated nothing but questions. And then they found the massive spherical metal housings. Formerly in the redacted paperwork, these were subsequently identified as bell casings or decorative architectural urns. But nothing about them corresponded to characteristic bell design. They were entirely too perfectly spherical. They were too precisely dimensioned. They were flawlessly balanced, as though they had been fabricated with modern industrial implements capable of sustaining perfect geometry on a massive scale. Certain resonators were broad enough to contain a full-size carriage within their hollow interiors. Others were entirely solid metal with complex internal cavity structures, designed exactly like the housing for harmonic oscillators or modern frequency amplification devices. The laborers from 1792, lacking the vocabulary for electrical engineering, characterized them in their personal correspondence as manufactured spheres, not bells, not art, geometric forms with an undeniable acoustic function, even if nobody alive could specify what that function was. Another profound peculiarity emerged in the arrangement of the conduits. These copper tracks were not merely supporting the bells from above. Many were configured in descending spiral patterns that made absolutely zero architectural sense for a belfry. They descended directly into the load-bearing tower walls. They interconnected between separate chambers. They were positioned around the spherical resonators in tight geometric arrays. This layout generated a deeply unsettling realization for the foremen on site. The traditional bells hanging above might not have merely served to call the faithful to Mass. The bells were likely just the visible, superficial components of something substantially larger. They were the decorative endpoints of a massive hidden system whose true dimensions were never documented, never taught, and furiously scrubbed from the authorized history of European architecture. The further the laborers investigated, the more their findings defied the 18th century. Copper components emerged with completely uniform, machine-like dimensions. Certain surfaces were polished to mirror finishes, so refined they were almost perfectly reflective. Others displayed precision-formed geometric patterns so exact that contemporary metallurgists still debate what high heat implements could have possibly created them before the Industrial Revolution. But the crystalline structures embedded within the copper remain the ultimate paradox. These resonant, frequency-aligned formations were located in systems supposedly built in the Dark Ages. The authorized explanation provided, decades later, natural mineral deposits and water corrosion, completely falls apart under scrutiny. It does not account for why the crystals emerged within the metal in organized fractal patterns. They were not randomly distributed. They were aligned. They were geometric. They grew exactly as though the metal was continuously exposed to specific high-frequency energy over sustained periods. That variety of result demands vibrational exposure far exceeding the occasional ringing of a bell. It exceeds any musical performance. It exceeds anything documented in the human story. Shortly following these paradigm-shattering discoveries in late 1792, the entire nature of the confiscation order shifted. A quiet panic seemed to grip the revolutionary authorities. The operation was abruptly accelerated. Chambers were frantically stripped of their mechanisms. Complex portions of the installations were ripped from the towers, severing the conduits. This was formally designated as urgent metal, reclamation for the war effort, a necessary sacrifice to fight the monarchists. But the choices about which systems to remove first and which components to melt down immediately generated subdued, fearful questions among the workers. Because the mechanisms that were destroyed most promptly were invariably the ones that contested the authorized historical chronology the most. The geometric resonators, the copper, coil arrays, the crystalline coated systems, the acoustic chambers connected to conduits extending deep into the earth. These were the first to the furnace. These conduits were the smoking gun. They weren't haphazard architectural features. They were the nervous system of a buried grid, a network of channels that aligned, calculated, and organized, as though they once linked to a substantially larger harmonic network, a network that connected every major tower throughout Paris and perhaps across the entire continent long before. Any culture we recognize laid claim to the land, and yet, almost as quickly as they were brought into the light, they were annihilated. Their components were melted into featureless bronze ingots. Their purpose was left unexplored. Their very presence was quietly, permanently eliminated from all later architectural surveys and restorations. When you examine the concluding months of the 1792 Bell confiscations, the reality is impossible to disregard. The operation didn't conclude naturally, it was forcefully terminated. The further the siege, removal crews proceeded into the anomaly, the more the character of their documentation transformed from routine procedural logs to guarded, indefinite whispers. It was exactly as though someone higher up the chain of command had abruptly realized what was being uncovered and violently clamped down on what could be recorded. The final chambers accessed within Paris's highest spires weren't classifiable as bell-hanging apparatuses. They were high technology. Copper work with connections so incredibly precise, you couldn't insert a razor blade between the seams. Resonators engineered for frequencies far beyond human hearing. And here is the ultimate betrayal that the history books conceal. The most sophisticated systems were the ones melted down first. Imagine if the cathedrals weren't built for worship at all, but were repurposed structures, the surviving visible nodes of a continental power network that predates the reset of recorded history. The 1792 Bell confiscation wasn't a revolutionary metal reclamation effort. It was a violent erasure. It was a brief, inadvertent glimpse into the true acoustic power of a stolen history, a history we were never intended to witness.